Stand up, you. The black one in the back.
Professor Stanton's voice cut through the lecture hall like a blade. Elijah Brooks rose slowly. 35 pairs of eyes locked onto him.
Yes, you. The diversity admission. Come to the board.
Stanton smirked. Prove a black brain can keep up with white ones. Scattered laughter rippled through the room.
Solve this occasion. Prove you belong here.
Elijah walked to the chalkboard. He picked up the chalk.
Prove a black brain can keep up with white ones.
Then he saw it. The equation was wrong. Deliberately wrong. Professor Stanton had written a trap designed to make Elijah fail publicly. But Elijah didn't fail. What he did next made the entire room go silent. What would you do if your professor set you up to fail?
Man, they really tried to set him up. Let's see how this plays out.
To understand what happened next, you need to know who Elijah Brooks really was. 18 years old.
Born in Roxbury, the poorest neighborhood in Boston. His mother, Dorothy, cleaned office buildings at night. His father died in a construction accident when Elijah was 10. No tutors, no prep schools, no connections. Just a library card and a brain that saw numbers differently than anyone else. Elijah taught himself calculus at 12, differential equations at 14. By 16, he was solving problems that college students struggled with. His high school math teacher called MIT. "You need to see this kid," she said. "He's special." MIT offered him a full scholarship. So did Harvard. So did Whitmore University, one of the most prestigious private institutions on the East Coast. Elijah chose Whitmore. It was smaller, more personal. He thought he would be seen there. He was wrong. Whitmore University sat on 200 acres of manicured lawns and ivy-covered buildings. Founded in 1856. Old money, old traditions, old attitudes. The mathematics department lived in Crawford Hall, a stone building named after the family that founded the school. Oil paintings of white men lined the hallways, every single one. Out of 1,200 freshmen, only 12 were black. And in Advanced Mathematics 301, Professor Stanton's elite class, Elijah was the only one. Professor Harold Stanton had ruled the math department for 30 years. Published author, award-winning teacher, his word was law. Students feared him. Colleagues respected him. Administrators protected him. But there was something else about Stanton. Something people whispered about but never said out loud. In the past 5 years, 3 black students had enrolled in his advanced class. All 3 left the program. 2 transferred to other schools. 1 dropped out completely. No formal complaints ever stuck. Stanton was too powerful, too connected, too careful. He never used slurs in writing. He never left evidence. He just made certain students feel so unwelcome, so stupid, so worthless, that they quit on their own. Now Elijah stood at that same chalkboard, the same place where 3 others had been broken. Stanton leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "We're waiting, Mr. Brooks. Or is this too difficult for a scholarship case?" More laughter from the class. Tyler Morrison, a wealthy white student in the front row, turned around with a grin. Maybe he needs a calculator. Or a translator. Stanton didn't correct him. He just smiled. Elijah stared at the equation. His heart was pounding, but his mind was calm. Something was wrong with line 2. The sign change. It was outside the square root when it should have been inside. A tiny error, almost invisible. But Elijah saw it immediately, and he understood exactly what it meant. If he solved the equation as written, he would get the wrong answer. He would look incompetent. Stanton would fail him in front of everyone. That was the trap. Elijah had two choices. Choice 1. Solve the problem as written. Get the wrong answer. Confirm every stereotype Stanton believed about black students. Choice 2. Point out the error. Challenge a professor with 30 years of experience. Risk being called arrogant, disrespectful, an angry black student who couldn't accept authority. Either way, Stanton won. Elijah's hand trembled slightly. He thought about his mother. Right now, she was probably scrubbing floors in some downtown office building. Her knees ached. Her back hurt. She hadn't taken a vacation in 15 years. Everything she sacrificed, every late night, every missed meal, every dollar saved, was for this moment. For Elijah to stand in rooms like this. To prove that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go. He couldn't fail her. He wouldn't. Elijah turned around. His voice was quiet, steady, respectful. "Professor Stanton, may I ask a question?" Stanton raised an eyebrow. "Questions? You're supposed to be solving, not asking." "I understand, sir. I just want to confirm. This is the exact equation you want me to solve, exactly as written." Stanton's smile flickered, just for a moment. "Are you suggesting I made a mistake? 30 years in this field, and you think I can't write a simple equation?" "No, sir. I'm just confirming." "Solve the problem." The room was dead silent. Elijah turned back to the board. He raised the chalk, and instead of solving the equation, he crossed out line 2 and rewrote it correctly. What do you think Stanton did when a freshman publicly corrected his work? The chalk scratched against the board. Every student held their breath. Elijah rewrote line 2. Clean, correct. The sign changed now inside the square root, exactly where it belonged. Then he kept going. Line 3, line 4, line 5. Each step flowed naturally from the corrected equation. He set down the chalk and stepped back. The solution was perfect. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. Professor Stanton's face went through 4 colors: pink, red, white, then a shade of purple Elijah had never seen on a human being. "What do you think you're doing?" Stanton's voice was barely controlled. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair. Elijah turned to face him, calm, respectful, quiet. "The equation had an error, sir. Line 2. The sign change was in the wrong position. I corrected it before solving." "You corrected it?" "Yes, sir." "You, a first-year student, corrected my equation." "The math was wrong, sir. I fixed it." The room was absolutely silent. No one breathed. No one blinked. Tyler Morrison's grin had disappeared. Other students exchanged glances. Something was happening that had never happened before in this classroom. A student had challenged Harold Stanton, and the student was right. But Stanton didn't acknowledge the correction. He couldn't. His entire identity was built on being the smartest person in every room. Instead, he attacked. "This is exactly what I expected." Stanton stood up slowly. "Arrogance, disrespect, a complete lack of academic discipline." He walked toward Elijah, each step deliberate. "You don't correct professors, Mr. Brooks. You learn from them. That's how education works. But clearly, wherever you came from didn't teach you that." Elijah said nothing. He just stood there. "F for today's examination. And I'm noting this incident in your academic file. Insubordination. Challenging faculty authority." Still, Elijah remained silent. "You can return to your seat now, if you can find it." Elijah walked back to his desk. He sat down. He didn't look at anyone, but inside his chest, something was burning. Not anger, something deeper. Something that had been building for 18 years. Class ended 20 minutes later. Students filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with Elijah. But one person stayed behind. Dr. Samuel Preston had been sitting in the back row, a visiting professor from Stanford, here to evaluate teaching quality across the department. He had seen everything. Preston approached Elijah in the hallway outside. "That equation on the board, you spotted the error immediately?" Elijah looked up, cautious. Another professor. Another potential threat. "Yes, sir." "How?" "Most graduate students wouldn't catch that mistake. I almost missed it myself." Elijah hesitated. He had learned to hide, to stay invisible. Showing his abilities only made him a target. But something in Preston's eyes was different. Curiosity, not judgment. "I see patterns," Elijah said quietly. "Numbers have shapes to me. When something is wrong, the shape breaks. I notice it." Preston stared at him for a long moment. "How long have you been studying mathematics?" "Since I was 8. Self-taught. Library books." Preston nodded slowly. Something was clicking in his mind. Pieces of a puzzle coming together. That equation Stanton wrote, it wasn't in any textbook. He created it himself. "I know, sir." "You know what that means?" Elijah met his eyes. "It means it wasn't an accident." Preston's expression darkened. No, it wasn't. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "Come to my office tomorrow, 4 o'clock. I think we need to talk." Elijah took the card. For the first time since arriving at Whitmore, someone had seen him, actually seen him. But Stanton had seen him too, and Stanton was already planning his next move. What happens when a powerful man realizes he's been exposed by the very student he tried to destroy? 4 o'clock the next day, Preston's temporary office on the 3rd floor of Crawford Hall. Elijah knocked twice. "Come in." The office was small, books stacked everywhere, papers covered every surface. Preston sat behind a cluttered desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Sit down, Elijah." Elijah sat. His guard was still up. 18 years of survival instincts don't disappear because someone hands you a business card. Preston studied him for a moment. "I've been at Stanford for 20 years. I've taught thousands of students. I've seen talent. I've seen genius. I've seen the difference between the two." He leaned forward. "What I saw yesterday? That wasn't just talent." Elijah said nothing. "I pulled your admission file this morning. Perfect SAT math score. State mathematics champion 3 years running. Full scholarship offers from MIT, Harvard, and here." Preston removed his glasses. "Why Whitmore? With your record, you could have gone anywhere." Elijah's voice was quiet. "I thought smaller would be better. More personal. I thought professors would actually see me here. And instead you got Stanton." "Yes, sir." Preston stood up. He walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "I'm going to show you something, and then I'm going to ask you a question." He returned to his desk and pulled out a folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a mathematical problem covered in handwritten notes. "I've been working on this for 3 months. It's a boundary condition problem in turbulent flow modeling. Every approach I've tried hits a wall." He slid the paper across the desk. "Take a look." Elijah picked it up. His eyes moved across the equations. Once, twice. Then something shifted in his expression. His focus deepened. The rest of the room seemed to fade away. Preston watched him carefully. For 2 full minutes, Elijah said nothing. He just stared at the paper. Then he asked for a blank sheet. Preston handed him one along with a pen. Elijah didn't write equations first. Instead, he drew a shape, a three-dimensional form that looked like a twisted donut. Preston frowned.
What is that? The problem. Elijah kept drawing. You're thinking about this in flat space, 2 dimensions, but the boundary isn't flat. He rotated the shape in his drawing, adding new lines. It curves. It folds back on itself. If you try to model it on a plane, you get discontinuities. The math breaks. Preston leaned closer. Go on. But if you map it onto a torus instead of a plane, Elijah tapped his drawing. The discontinuity disappears. The boundary condition becomes periodic. It loops. He wrote 3 lines of transformation beneath the drawing. Quick, clean, confident. The problem solves itself. Preston didn't move. For 30 seconds, he just stared at the paper. His face cycled through confusion, then recognition, then something that looked almost like shock. 3 months, he whispered. 3 months I've been stuck on this. He looked at Elijah. You just solved it in 5 minutes. Elijah set down the pen. The answer was in the geometry. You just had to see it differently. Preston fell back in his chair. His hand covered his mouth. How? He finally asked. How do you see it like that? Who taught you to think this way? Elijah's answer was simple. No one. I taught myself. When you don't have teachers, you find your own way to understand. I see the shapes first. The formulas come after. Preston was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, heavier. Elijah, I need to ask you about yesterday, about Stanton's equation. Elijah's expression tightened. This was dangerous territory. What about it? You said the error wasn't accidental. What did you mean? Elijah hesitated. Speaking against a professor, especially one as powerful as Stanton, could end his academic career before it started. But Preston had seen his gift. Preston had listened. Maybe, just maybe, Preston could be trusted. The equation he wrote, Elijah began slowly. Line 2 had a sign error. The change was outside the square root, when it should have been inside. I saw that. Most people wouldn't catch it. That's the point. Elijah met Preston's eyes. If I had solved the equation as written, my answer would have been exactly wrong. Not partially wrong, exactly wrong. The opposite sign on the final result. Preston nodded. Which would make you look incompetent. Yes, like I didn't understand basic algebraic manipulation, like I didn't belong in an advanced class. And Stanton would have proof. Proof that the diversity student couldn't keep up. Proof that I should be removed from the program. Preston's jaw tightened. You're saying he deliberately wrote a flawed equation, designed specifically to make you fail. Elijah didn't blink. I'm saying the equation wasn't in any textbook. He created it himself, and the error was too perfect, too precise. It wasn't a mistake. It was a weapon. Preston reached into his desk drawer. He pulled out another document, a draft of Stanton's upcoming lecture for the academic showcase. I reviewed his work last week, part of my evaluation. He flipped to page 3. Look at this proof. Tell me what you see. Elijah scanned the page. His eyes stopped on line 4. Same pattern, he said quietly. The orientation preservation assumption is wrong. He's proving the converse of his own theorem. Preston closed the folder. He's presenting this at the academic showcase in front of 400 people, parents, donors, the board of trustees. And it's wrong. Completely wrong.
Their eyes met. "What do we do?" Elijah asked. Preston shook his head slowly. "I don't know yet, but I know one thing for certain. Harold Stanton isn't just a bad teacher. He's been targeting students like you for years. And if we don't stop him, you won't be his last victim." But stopping a man like Stanton wouldn't be easy, because Stanton had already started his counterattack. The counterattack came faster than anyone expected. 2 days after the classroom incident, Elijah received an official letter from the Dean of Students' office. Academic disciplinary hearing. Charges: insubordination, disrespect toward faculty, conduct unbecoming of a Whitmore student. The hearing was scheduled for the day of the academic showcase, the biggest event of the year. 400 guests, parents, donors, board members, local media, and Elijah would be on trial. Stanton had made his move. If he couldn't break Elijah in the classroom, he would destroy him publicly, officially, permanently. The news spread through campus like wildfire. "Did you hear? That black freshman is getting expelled." "I heard he cursed at Professor Stanton." "No, he tried to fight him." Diversity admissions, man. They can't handle real academics. The rumors grew worse every day, each version more distorted than the last. By the end of the week, half the campus believed Elijah had physically threatened a professor. No one asked Elijah what actually happened. No one asked for his side. He was already guilty. The trial was just a formality. Preston tried to intervene. He filed a formal request to testify at the hearing. As a Stanford professor evaluating teaching quality, his observations should have been relevant. The request was denied. Professor Gerald Crawford, Stanton's closest friend and the chairman of the disciplinary committee, ruled that outside testimony was not applicable to student conduct matters. Preston pushed harder. He contacted the dean directly. 2 hours later, he received a phone call from Stanford. "Dr. Preston, we've received some concerning reports about your conduct at Whitmore." What reports? Allegations of inappropriate relationships with students. Nothing formal yet. But if these allegations continue, your sabbatical position may need to be reconsidered. The threat was clear. Help Elijah, lose your career. Preston had a choice to make. Meanwhile, Rachel Whitfield was having her own crisis of conscience. Rachel was a senior, top of her class, Stanton's teaching assistant for 2 years. She had always admired him, respected him, defended him. But she had been in that classroom. She had seen the equation. She had watched Elijah correct it, correctly. And she had seen Stanton's face afterward. Not embarrassment, not surprise. Rage. Pure rage. The rage of someone whose trap had failed. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the other students, the ones who came before Elijah. Marcus Williams, transferred to state after 1 semester with Stanton. Deja Robinson, dropped out, never finished her degree. Andre Mitchell, switched majors, gave up on mathematics entirely. 3 black students, 3 destroyed dreams, 1 professor. Was it coincidence, or was it a pattern? Rachel made a decision, a dangerous one. She went to Stanton's office after hours, used her TA access code to enter. His computer was still logged in. She searched his emails. What she found made her stomach turn. Emails to Crawford, emails to other faculty, dating back 5 years. Another diversity case in 301. I'll handle it like the others. The Williams boy withdrew today. Good riddance. These affirmative action students dilute our program's reputation. And one email sent the night before Elijah's first class. New diversity admission starting Monday. Full scholarship. Let's see how long this one lasts. Rachel took photos of everything. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped her phone twice. She was about to leave when the office door opened. Stanton stood in the doorway. His eyes moved from Rachel to the computer screen. "What are you doing?" Rachel couldn't speak. "You're fired." Stanton's voice was ice. "And if you breathe a word of this to anyone, I'll make sure you never work in academia. Ever." He stepped closer. "Do you understand me?" Rachel ran. She didn't stop until she reached her dorm room. She locked the door and collapsed against it, sobbing. She had the evidence, but she was terrified to use it. Back in his dorm, Elijah sat alone at his desk. His textbooks lay open, but he couldn't focus. 3 days until the hearing. 3 days until his future was decided by people who had already made up their minds. All right, I'm already hooked at this point. Like an 18-year-old kid with that kind of gift? And this is how they treat him? Nah, if that was me, I'd lose my mind. That's just wild. But the worst was still coming, because Stanton wasn't just trying to expel Elijah anymore. He was trying to erase him completely. What happens when a man with unlimited power decides to destroy someone with unlimited potential? 3 days until the hearing. The clock was ticking. Elijah had almost no one on his side. Preston was being blackmailed into silence. Rachel was too terrified to come forward. And every day, the rumors grew worse. But Elijah wasn't completely alone. Day 1. Preston couldn't testify, but he could still investigate. He spent the entire day in the university archives, pulling records, cross-referencing enrollment data, tracking patterns. What he found confirmed his worst suspicions. In the past 5 years, 7 black students had enrolled in Stanton's advanced mathematics program. 7. Only 1 had graduated, and that student transferred to a different advisor after just 1 semester with Stanton. The other 6? Gone. Transferred, dropped out, switched majors, disappeared from the mathematics department entirely. Preston documented everything. Names, dates, outcomes. But the documentation wasn't proof. He needed more. That evening, he made phone calls. Former students, former colleagues, anyone who might talk. Most hung up immediately. The name Stanton made people nervous. But one person called back. Dr. Michelle Warren, now teaching at a small college in Ohio. She had been Stanton's teaching assistant 15 years ago. "I always knew something was wrong," she said quietly. "The way he treated certain students, the patterns. But I was young. I was scared. I needed his recommendation." "Would you be willing to make a statement?" Long pause. "I have a family now, a career. If I speak up and nothing changes, Stanton will destroy me." "What if things could change this time?" Another pause, longer. "Send me what you have. I'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. Day 2. Rachel Whitfield sat in her dorm room, staring at her phone. The photos of Stanton's emails were still there. Evidence of years of targeted discrimination. She could send them to the dean. She could blow the whole thing open. But Stanton's threat echoed in her mind. "I'll make sure you never work in academia. Ever." She was 22 years old. Her entire future was in mathematics. Graduate school applications were due in 2 months. She needed recommendations. She needed connections. Stanton controlled all of it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "So proud of you, sweetie. First one in our family to get a master's degree soon. Love you." Rachel's hands trembled. She had worked so hard to get here. Was she really going to throw it all away for a student she barely knew? But then she thought about Elijah, standing at that chalkboard, alone, surrounded by people who wanted him to fail. She thought about Marcus Williams. She had been his tutor briefly. Smart kid, kind eyes, full of potential. He was working at a grocery store now. His mathematics career ended before it started. How many more would there be? Rachel made a decision. Not the safe one, the right one. She forwarded the photos to a new email address, an anonymous account she created just for this purpose. Then she sent one message to Dean Catherine Wells. You need to see this. Day 3, the morning of the hearing. Elijah woke up at 5 a.m. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours. He put on his only dress shirt, the one his mother bought him for high school graduation. It was slightly too small now, but it was all he had. His phone rang. Mom. Baby, I couldn't sleep. Tell me the truth. What's happening? Elijah closed his eyes. Mom, some people here, they don't think I belong. They're trying to push me out. Silence on the line. Did you do something wrong? No, ma'am. I corrected a professor's mistake in front of the class, and he didn't like it. More silence. Then his mother's voice came back, harder than before. Elijah Marcus Brooks, you listen to me. He straightened up instinctively. I have cleaned toilets for 20 years. I have scrubbed floors on my hands and knees. I have been invisible to people who thought they were better than me. Her voice cracked slightly. I did all of that so you could stand in rooms like that. So you could be seen. Not so you could bow down to liars. Mom, don't you dare apologize for being right. Don't you dare apologize for being smarter than them. You hear me? Elijah's eyes burned. Yes, ma'am. You show them who you are. You show them what I raised. I will, Mom. I love you, baby. I love you too. He hung up, wiped his eyes, took a deep breath. Whatever happened today, he would face it standing. Meanwhile, the campus was buzzing with activity. The academic showcase was the biggest event of the year. Tents on the main lawn, catering trucks, parents arriving in expensive cars. And in the administration building, the disciplinary committee was assembling. Professor Gerald Crawford sat at the center of the long table. 2 other faculty members flanked him. One was known to be neutral. The other had been personally recruited by Stanton. The deck was stacked. Elijah arrived at 8:30. He was directed to a small waiting room. No windows. 1 chair. A pitcher of water that no one had bothered to fill. He sat alone for 45 minutes. At 9:15, a security guard opened the door. They're ready for you. Elijah stood. His legs felt unsteady, but his mind was clear. He walked down the hallway toward the hearing room. Each step echoed against the marble floors. Portraits of old white men stared down at him from the walls. Founders, benefactors, trustees. Generations of people who looked nothing like him. He stopped at the door. Behind it sat the people who would decide his future. People who had already made up their minds. People who saw a black student who didn't know his place. But they didn't know what Elijah knew. They didn't see what he saw. And they had no idea what he was capable of. Elijah pushed open the door. The room was larger than he expected. A long conference table dominated the center. Crawford sat at the head, flanked by the other committee members. And on the right side of the room, seated in a leather chair like a king on his throne, Professor Harold Stanton. Their eyes met. Stanton smiled. The smile of a man who had already won. Elijah didn't smile back. He just walked to the single chair on the left side of the room, the defendant's seat. He sat down and waited. But something was different today. Something Stanton didn't know about yet. At that exact moment, Dean Catherine Wells was in her office, reading an anonymous email. An email containing photographs of messages that Harold Stanton never expected anyone to see. The game was about to change. Dean Catherine Wells stared at her computer screen. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago. She hadn't noticed. The photographs were damning. Email after email, year after year. A pattern so clear, so deliberate, that it made her physically sick. Another diversity case in 301. I'll handle it like the others. The Robinson girl finally withdrew. One less problem. These affirmative action students don't belong in serious academic programs. But one email made her blood run cold. Sent the night before Elijah's first class. New diversity admissions starting Monday. Full scholarship from Roxbury. Let's see how long this one lasts. This wasn't about academic standards. This was hunting. Wells picked up her phone and called the registrar. I need enrollment records for Advanced Mathematics 301. Last 5 years. Every student who withdrew, transferred, or changed majors. On my desk in 30 minutes. She hung up and kept reading. The deeper she went, the worse it got. Stanton wasn't just discriminating. He was coordinating. Crawford knew. At least 2 other faculty members knew. This wasn't one bad professor. This was a system. Wells stood up and walked to her window. The academic showcase was in full swing below. Parents laughing, students posing for photos, donors shaking hands with administrators. And somewhere in the administration building, a disciplinary committee was about to expel an innocent student. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. Meanwhile, in the hearing room, Elijah was learning the truth. Crawford was reading the charges. Insubordination, disrespect, conduct unbecoming. But Elijah wasn't listening. He was watching Stanton, studying him. The professor sat perfectly still, hands folded, expression calm. The picture of academic authority. Too calm. Elijah thought back to that first day, the equation on the board, the mistake in line 2. He had assumed it was a trap, a one-time thing, a test to make him fail. But now, sitting in this room, surrounded by Stanton's allies, another possibility emerged. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. Long before Elijah ever set foot on campus, Stanton hadn't reacted to a threat. He had executed a strategy he had used before, a strategy that had worked every single time. Until now. Elijah's hands tightened on his armrests. He wasn't just a student being disciplined. He was a target. Chosen before he arrived. Marked for elimination. The equation wasn't a test. It was a weapon. And suddenly, everything made sense. The rigged hearing, the stacked committee, the impossible timeline. Stanton wasn't trying to prove Elijah was incompetent. He was trying to destroy him before anyone discovered the truth. But it was too late. Because at that exact moment, Dean Wells pushed open the hearing room door, and the look on her face told everyone that something had changed. Dean Wells didn't sit down. She stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching. Crawford glanced at her nervously. "Dean Wells, this is a closed hearing, faculty only." "Continue, Professor Crawford. I'm simply observing." Her voice was ice. Crawford swallowed hard and turned back to his papers. "Very well. Professor Stanton, please present your case." Stanton rose slowly, confident, theatrical, a man in complete control of his stage. "Thank you, Professor Crawford. Distinguished colleagues." He gestured toward Elijah without looking at him. "What we have here is a cautionary tale. A student admitted through diversity initiatives, given every advantage, every opportunity. And how does he repay this institution?" Stanton paused for effect. "With arrogance, with disrespect, with a complete disregard for academic hierarchy." He began pacing. "On his very first day in my classroom, Mr. Brooks publicly challenged my expertise. He altered my work on the board without permission. He implied, in front of 35 students, that a professor with 30 years of experience had made an error." Stanton shook his head sadly. "This is not how scholarship works. This is not how learning works. This is ego. Unchecked, undisciplined ego." He turned to the committee. "I recommend immediate expulsion. For the good of the program. For the good of Whitmore." Crawford nodded gravely. "Thank you, Professor Stanton. Mr. Brooks, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Elijah looked around the room. 3 committee members who had already decided. Stanton smirking in his chair, Dean Wells standing silently in the back. No witnesses, no advocate, no one to speak for him. He thought about his mother, working the night shift right now, scrubbing floors, believing her son was safe, believing her sacrifices meant something. He thought about the students who came before him, Marcus, Deja, Andre, all of them broken by this same system, this same man. He thought about walking out, just leaving, accepting defeat, starting over somewhere else. Maybe that was the smart move, the safe move. But then he remembered his mother's words. "Don't you dare apologize for being right." Elijah looked up. The equation was wrong. Crawford frowned. "Excuse me?" The equation Professor Stanton wrote on the board. It had an error. Line 2. The sign change was outside the square root. It should have been inside. Stanton's smile flickered. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. Even now, he refuses to accept." "If I had solved it as written," Elijah continued, voice steady, "my answer would have been exactly wrong. The opposite sign. It would have proven I didn't understand basic algebra." He looked directly at Stanton. "That equation wasn't a test, Professor. It was a trap." The room went silent. Crawford cleared his throat. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Brooks. Do you have any proof?" "Check the textbook. That equation isn't in there. Professor Stanton created it himself, specifically for that day, specifically for me." Stanton stood up abruptly. "This is absurd. I will not sit here and be accused by a first-year student who—" "Actually, I'd like to hear more." Every head turned to Dean Wells. She stepped forward, folder in hand. "I'd like to hear Mr. Brooks explain exactly what was wrong with that equation. In detail." Crawford sputtered. "Dean Wells, this is highly irregular." "Professor Crawford, given the information I've received this morning, I think we need to be very thorough, very careful." She looked at Elijah. "Mr. Brooks, there's a chalkboard behind you. Show us what you mean." Elijah's heart was pounding, but his mind was calm. This was it, the only chance he would get. He stood up slowly, walked to the chalkboard, picked up the chalk. His hand trembled slightly, just for a moment. Then he remembered who he was, what he could do, what his mother had raised. "They can take my scholarship," he thought. "They can take my future, but they cannot take what's inside my head." He turned to face the board and began to write. The chalk touched the board. The room held its breath. Elijah wrote the first line, the original equation exactly as Stanton had written it 3 weeks ago. This is what Professor Stanton put on the board. He stepped back so everyone could see. Line 1 is correct. Standard differential setup. Nothing wrong here. He moved to line 2. But here, this is where the problem starts. He circled a small section of the equation. When you move a term across the equal sign inside a square root, the sign change happens inside the radical, not outside. He wrote both versions side by side. Professor Stanton wrote it like this. He pointed left. But it should be like this. He pointed right. Crawford squinted at the board. I'm not sure I follow. Let me show you what happens next. Elijah kept writing. Line 3, line 4, line 5. Because of that single error in line 2, every following step goes in the wrong direction. The equation doesn't just give a wrong answer, it gives the exact opposite answer. He underlined the final result. If I had solved the equation as Professor Stanton wrote it, I would have gotten -12. The correct answer is +12, exactly opposite. He turned to face the committee. To anyone grading the test, it would look like I made a fundamental error, like I didn't understand basic sign conventions, like I didn't belong in an advanced mathematics class. Silence. Stanton's face had lost all color. This is ridiculous, he stammered. A simple mistake. Anyone could... Could what, Professor? Elijah's voice was calm, steady, devastating. Could accidentally write an equation that isn't in any textbook? Could accidentally make an error so precise that it produces the exact opposite answer? Could accidentally do this on the very first day with the only black student in the class at the board? The room was absolutely still. That's not an accident. That's a design. Dean Wells stepped forward. Mr. Brooks, can you also demonstrate the correct solution, the complete proof? Yes, ma'am. Elijah turned back to the board, and this time he didn't just correct, he created. Line by line, he rebuilt the equation from scratch. But he didn't stop at the basic solution. He extended it, transformed it, took it places that weren't in any undergraduate textbook. The chalk moved faster now. His confidence grew with each line. He showed the geometric interpretation, drew a three-dimensional shape that made the abstract concrete. When you visualize it this way, he explained, you can see that the boundary condition folds back on itself. It's not linear. It's periodic. He wrote 3 more lines of transformation. Map it onto a toroidal surface, and the discontinuity disappears. The solution becomes elegant, self-contained. He set down the chalk and stepped back. The board was covered with mathematics. Not just corrections, original thinking, graduate-level work from an 18-year-old freshman. For 10 seconds, no one spoke. Then Dr. Harrison, the neutral committee member, slowly stood up. My God, he whispered. This is exceptional. He looked at Elijah with completely new eyes. This isn't undergraduate work. This is doctoral level, maybe beyond. Crawford's face had gone pale. Stanton was gripping the armrests of his chair so hard his knuckles were white. Dean Wells turned to face him. Professor Stanton, would you like to respond? Stanton opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The equation, there may have been... A mistake? Elijah's voice cut through the room. He turned to face Stanton directly. 18 years of invisibility. 18 years of being underestimated. 18 years of watching people like Stanton look right through him. All of it burned away in this moment. Professor Stanton, I didn't come to Whitmore to cause trouble. I came to learn, to grow, to honor the sacrifices my mother made working night shifts for 20 years so I could have this chance. His voice remained steady, controlled, powerful. I sat in the back of your classroom because I didn't want attention. I just wanted to learn. He pointed at the board. But you didn't see a student. You saw a target, a problem to be eliminated. Just like Marcus Williams, just like Deja Robinson, just like Andre Mitchell. Stanton flinched at each name. I'm not incompetent, Professor. I'm not unqualified. I'm not a diversity admission who doesn't belong. Elijah stepped closer. The truth is the opposite. I spotted your error in 3 seconds. I corrected your work before solving it. I just demonstrated mathematics that you haven't touched in 20 years. The room was absolutely silent. I don't lack ability, Professor. I have more ability than you've seen in 30 years of teaching. He let that land. The only mistake I made was assuming you wanted your students to succeed. But you don't. You want certain students to fail. You need them to fail. Because if they succeed, they prove everything you believe is wrong. Stanton's face was gray now. His hands were trembling. Dr. Harrison spoke up again. Professor Stanton, I think you need to respond to these allegations. The mathematics on that board speaks for itself. Either that equation was an accident, or it wasn't. Crawford tried to intervene. Perhaps we should take a recess. No! Dean Wells' voice was final. Professor Stanton, did you or did you not deliberately write an incorrect equation designed to make this student fail? Every eye in the room locked onto Stanton. His mouth opened. His voice came out barely a whisper. I may have been mistaken. Mistaken about what, Professor? Stanton's eyes dropped to the floor. The equation. It appears there was an error. An accidental error? Silence. Professor Stanton, was it accidental? The longest pause of Elijah's life. Then, so quietly that only the front row could hear, no. The word hung in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. Dr. Harrison sat down heavily. Crawford put his head in his hands, and Dean Wells pulled out her folder. Then I think it's time we discussed the other evidence I received this morning. She opened the folder and placed the first photograph on the table. Let's talk about what you wrote the night before Mr. Brooks arrived at Whitmore. The color drained from Stanton's face completely. He knew exactly what was in that folder. And he knew his 30-year career had just ended. Dean Wells spread the photographs across the table, one by one. These are emails from your account, Professor Stanton, sent over the past 5 years. She read the first one aloud. Another diversity case in 301. I'll handle it like the others. Dated September 2019. Stanton didn't move. The Robinson girl finally withdrew. One less problem. November 2020. Crawford's face had turned ashen. He was mentioned in several of these emails. And this one, sent the night before Mr. Brooks started your class. Wells held up the paper. New diversity admission starting Monday. Full scholarship from Roxbury. Let's see how long this one lasts. She set it down. This wasn't a mistake, Professor. This was a campaign. 5 years. 7 students. All black. All pushed out of your program. Dr. Harrison stood up abruptly. I move to dismiss all charges against Mr. Brooks. Immediately. Seconded, said the third committee member, speaking for the first time. Crawford sat frozen. He couldn't second it. He was implicated too. Motion passes. Dean Wells closed the folder. Mr. Brooks, you are cleared of all charges. Your academic record will reflect no disciplinary action. But she wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am opening a formal investigation into Professor Stanton's conduct. Effective immediately, he is suspended from all teaching duties. Stanton finally spoke. You can't do this. I have tenure. I have 30 years. You have emails, Professor, documenting a pattern of racial discrimination. Your tenure won't protect you from this. She turned to Crawford. Professor Crawford, given your involvement in these communications, you are also suspended, pending investigation. Crawford's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. Dr. Harrison stepped forward. He looked at Elijah with something new in his eyes. Respect. Mr. Brooks, the academic showcase is still happening outside. 400 people are waiting to see our best and brightest. He glanced at the chalkboard covered with Elijah's work. I believe we've just found our keynote speaker. The room shifted. The air changed. 30 minutes ago, Elijah was a defendant, a problem, a target. Now he was being invited to the main stage. But the biggest surprise was still coming, and it would change Elijah's life forever. 1 hour later, Atkinson Auditorium, 400 people. Parents, donors, board members, faculty, students. And at the podium, Elijah Brooks, still wearing his too small graduation shirt, still 18 years old, still from Roxbury. But everything else had changed. He didn't talk about Stanton. He didn't talk about the hearing. He talked about mathematics, about seeing shapes before formulas, about teaching himself calculus from library books, about the beauty of numbers when you let them speak. The audience was silent, captivated, seeing something they had never expected. When he finished, the applause started slowly. 1 person, then 10, then the entire room. A standing ovation for a freshman who almost got expelled 3 hours ago. Afterward, a woman in an elegant suit approached him. Margaret Sterling, CEO of Sterling Technologies, Whitmore's largest donor. Mr. Brooks, I'd like to discuss a research fellowship. Full funding, any program you choose. Elijah shook her hand. His grip was steady now. Thank you, ma'am. I'd like that. Across the room, Stanton stood near the exit, watching. His face was empty, defeated. Crawford approached him quietly. Harold, we should go. Stanton didn't move. His eyes stayed on Elijah. 30 years, he whispered. 30 years I've built this department. He finally turned away. His shoulders slumped. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway. No applause for him, no handshakes, no future, just silence. That night, Elijah sat in his dorm room. His phone rang. Mom. Baby, how did it go? Elijah smiled, really smiled, for the first time in weeks. Mom, they believed me. Everyone saw. Silence on the line. Then, soft crying. I always knew, baby.
I always knew. Yo, real talk, this story hits different for me. Because I've been that kid. Overlooked, doubted, told I didn't belong. And I know how it feels when someone finally sees you. Like, really sees you. That's why I had to share this one. So here's my ask. If you've ever been underestimated, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. Hit subscribe for more stories like this, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today, because everyone deserves to be seen.